The first page is just factoring out the common factors. So we are just looking at the numbers and the variables to see what they have in common. We're going to put it on the outside, leave the rest in parentheses. So like for this first one, you are going to just look at your 40 and your 5, and you're going to say, well, I have a 5 in common. Then you're going to look at your variables. You can only use the lowest amount of variables because that's all that one can give. So in this case, the most I can take out is 2 of those x's. So I'm going to take out x squared. And then you're just dividing. 40 divided by 5 is 8. I had 3 x's. I divided by 2 x's. I have an x left. When you have taken everything out, all your x's are gone. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And you need to put a 1 there. So this is going to be 5x squared on the outside, 8x minus 1 on the inside. And that is your answer for this. There are going to be times when you have multiple variables. If you keep going further down, you can see that I've added variables in as we go. And so same thing applies there. All right, at the bottom, you'll see that we've added variables. So I'm going to do the same thing with the numbers. I'm going to say 5, 15, and 10. And I can take out a 5 there. I'm going to look at my x's. I have an x to the first, x squared, and x to the first. So I can take out 1x. When I look at my y's, the most I can take out is 1y. And then I'm going to just divide. Negative 5 divided by positive 5, that's going to be negative. I took out all the x's. I took one of those y's. Negative 15 divided by 5, I get a 3. I took one of the x's, and I took that y out. And then 10 divided by 5 is a 2, and I took an x and a y out. So it's going to look like that. And once you factor that out, you are finished. If it just says factor out the common factor, that's what you're looking for, common factor, okay? The next page actually says factor completely, and that's different. We're going to look for common factors, but we're going to keep going. These are done at this point. So when you look at this first one, you'll notice that there is a 1 in front. When there is a 1 in front, you only have to look at this last number, 27. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 27, and that add or subtract to give me 6. In this case, in order to get a negative 27, I have to have 1 positive and 1 negative, which means I'm really looking for subtracting and getting that middle term because it's 1 positive and 1 negative. So if you need to list all of your factors here, you can. You should pretty quickly get to 3 and 9, right? 3 and 9 will multiply to give me 27. I need one of those to be a positive and one to be a negative. And I need a negative 6. So that's going to tell me a positive 3 and a negative 9. This will always tell you your larger term, right? So if my larger term is negative, that means that middle term will be negative. And you can check it. If I multiply 3 times negative 9, do I get negative 27? Yes. If I add 3 and negative 9, do I get negative 6 in the center? Yes. So that tells me I have the right factors, all right? When you have a 1 in front, you don't have to break it up into 4 terms and factor by grouping. You are already at your answer. You can go straight to x, and then I'm going to use a positive 3, x, and I'm going to use a minus 9 there. So I don't have to go through the whole process of putting it into 4 terms, grouping them, and factor by grouping. I'm actually done at this point. So I am looking for factors here that multiply. So I have to multiply to get this one. And I have to add those same 2 numbers to get that one. So that's why 3 times 9, that gave me the 27. 3 plus the negative 9, that gave me the negative 6. And that's how I know I have my 2 factors. And again, you can always foil that. If you want to double check your work, you can foil it once you're done and see if you got the right answer. All right, let's look at number 13. First of all, if you see 5 and 75 from me, you need to be looking for a common factor because I'm not going to make you multiply 5 and 75 and do factors of that, all right? So when you see numbers that big, your first little knot should be, I probably can take something out. But honestly, that's the first step in factoring. So even at the top, you could have thought about that, but since you had a 1, that kind of told you a common factor didn't come out. At this point, you need to look at the 5, the 40, and the 75 and say, does anything come out that's in common before I start doing this? Yeah, it's a 5, right? So I am going to go ahead and do like I did on the first page, and I am going to take the 5 out first, all right? And then I'm going to go through and divide all of these. 5 divided by 5, that's going to be a 1a squared. 40 divided by 5, that's the 8. And then 75 divided by 5, that's going to be the 15. All right, and so now I am going to do exactly what I did on the ones above it. I technically have a 1 in front here because I took out that 5. So I only have to worry about factors of 15, multiply to give me a positive 15, and add to give me a negative 8. So to get a positive 15, I know they both have to be the same sign. If it's negative on the end, I automatically know one's positive and one's negative. That's the only way to get negative. If it's positive, there's two options. Either they're both positive or they're both negative. And so I'm going to look to this guy and say, they're going to be two negatives that multiply, okay? And again, if you need to list them out, just list out your factors of 15 until you get to that will multiply to give you 15 and add to give you 8. That's going to be your negative 3 and your negative 5. Again, you can go out here and say, well, if I do negative 3 times negative 5, do I get positive 15? Yes. If I add negative 3 plus negative 5, do I get that negative 8? Yes, I do. So I know those are my correct terms, all right? And again, this is not one where you have to multiply across. You have your answer at this point. You know you have to bring this 5 down, and then you're going to have an a minus 3. That was a factor. And an a minus 5. That was my other factor. And I am done with this one. Anytime you have 4 terms, you're going to factor by grouping. All right? Factor by grouping is really a simple method. You're literally grouping them. So we're going to put parentheses around the first 2 and parentheses around the last 2. Remember that if this sign that is in between those 2 groups is negative, then I have to change the last term, whatever it is, do the opposite. This is a negative 6. I'm going to change that to a plus 6. Okay, you're just doing the opposite. And then I am going to factor the first group and the second group. I'm going to look at my 5 and my 30 and say, well, a 5 can come out. My n cubed and my n squared, I can take out the n squared. 5 divided by 5 is 1. I took out one of my n's. 30 divided by 5 is 60, and I took out both of my n's. Then I'm going to put that minus. If you have a group and you don't have anything in common that you can take out, you need to put a 1 there. Yeah. So make sure you put that 1 so that it shows up in your final answer. When you factor by grouping, these 2 groups should be identical or you did something wrong. Like there are ones that don't factor by grouping, but I'm going to give you ones that always factor by grouping. So once you've done this process, these groups should be identical. And that is your first part of the answer, n plus 6. What's left over, that tells you your other group, 5n squared minus 1. And that's going to be my answer. And once again, you can FOIL it and check it. You'll get what you started with. All right, for the next one, again, your first step is to look for a common factor. And so if you look at number 21, the first thing you need to do is say, can I take something out of all of these numbers? 21, 42, 12, and 24 actually have a number in common. And so we want to actually pull that number out first before we do any factoring. And so if you look at those, 3 actually goes into all of those, all right? You can always tell because adding up the digits are divisible by 3, right? 2 and 1 is 3, 4 and 2 is 6, that's divisible, 1 and 2, 2 and 4. So you can tell if something's divisible by 3. So I know that a 3 can come out. I'm actually going to take that out first. And then I'm going to do my grouping afterwards. So 21, I'm going to divide by 3. I'm going to divide 42 by 3. Do my 12. And do my last one there. And so after I take out my common factor, I'm going to do my grouping again. And just like we did above, I'm going to group the first 2, group the last 2. Again, I grouped behind a negative. So I'm going to change that last sign. I'm going to leave this 3 out here. It's really easy to forget that one. So I just leave it there. You'll notice I'm putting brackets so that I can pay attention to where my groups are. And then I'm going to look at the first group, 7 and 14. I can take a 7 out. Between the n cubed and the n squared, I'm going to do the lower one, n squared. Dividing it, 7 divided by 7 is 1, and I took out 2 of my 3, so I have an n left. 14 divided by 7 is 2, and I took out both of those n's. Make sure you put that minus sign that's there and go to your next group. What can I take out between the 4 and the 8? 4. So I have a 4 in common. I'm going to put the 4 on the outside. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and I didn't take any n's out, so I have an n. Plus 8 divided by 4 is 2. All right? And again, when you are factoring by grouping, these two groups should end up being exactly the same. All right? Yes. My final step here is to write down all my factors. Don't forget this 3. So we're going to write the 3 down. I usually start with the group that's in common. That's just how I do it. So I'm going to say n plus 2. And then my final group is what's left over. 7n squared minus 4. And that will be my answer here. When you have something like this, I have a leading coefficient that's not a 1, and I don't have anything in common. I can't take that 5 out like I could do in the first set of these. This is where you're going to multiply across. So I'm going to take that 5, and I'm going to multiply across to that 6. So 5 times 6 gives me 30. All right? I now need to look for factors of 30 that give me 17. I am again going to pay attention to my positives and negatives. I specifically need a positive 30 here, but I need it to add up to be a negative 17, which means that I am going to have to look for a negative, right? And again, you can list your factors of 30 if you want to. I just start at 1 and go down, right? But you should rather quickly see which one's going to give you 17, right? So a negative 2 and a negative 15. Negative 2 times negative 15, if I multiply those, that's going to give me my 30. And negative 2 plus negative 15 will give me that negative 17, which is what I'm looking for. This is where you break it up into 4 terms. We're going to rewrite this. We're going to leave the 5x squared alone. We're going to rewrite this to the terms that we found. So we're going to use these right there. We're going to say minus 2x minus 15x. And then we're going to leave this plus 6 alone. So the only thing we're trying to figure out is what factors to rewrite the middle term to. The middle term is the only one we're touching here. At this point, it is identical to the ones you just did. You are literally just factoring by grouping at this point, all right? So I'm going to group my first 2. I'm going to group my last 2. What did I group in between here? So that means I changed this guy right there, all right? I'm going to factor the same. 5 and 2 have nothing in common, but the x squared and the x do. I can take an x out of this first group. I still have the 5. I took one of my x's, and I still have the 2. In the second group, 15 and 6 have something in common. What is it? 3, right? And you will get a 5 when you divide. So you will get 15 divided by 3 is 5x. Because I changed this to a negative, this is minus. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And again, these should be identical, all right? If they're not, you did something wrong in your factoring at this point. All right, so to finish this off, I'm going to put my common group here. And what's left over is my last group. We're going to do one more just so you see it one more time, and then you're going to work on your own. All right, so that's my answer. And again, you can FOIL this, and you should get what you started with. That is how you check these. Me through it. What's my first step here?
Multiply the 3 over.
Yes, I don't have a common factor, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply 3 times my 15. 3 times 15 is going to give me 45, right? Now, this is going to be a positive 45. Positive 3 times positive 15 is positive 45. My factors need to multiply to give me that. Is it going to be positive, negative, positive, positive, or negative, negative?
Negative.
And how do you know negative, negative?
That's a negative 14.
Yes, the middle term is negative 14. So you can list these factors if you want to. 1 and 45. 2 doesn't go into it. We know 3 and 15. 4 doesn't go into it. 5 and 9, we probably just hit the one we were looking for, right? All right. And so list your factors until you know, list your groups until you know which one it is. Negative 5 and negative 19, you can check it. If I multiply negative 5 and negative 9, do I get positive 45? Yes. If I add negative 5 and negative 9, do I get negative 14? Yes. That's what I need. So now I'm rewriting it. Leave the first term the same. What are my middle terms now going to look like?
Like 9 and 5. Okay.
Right. Minus 5k minus 9k. It does not matter which order you put them in, by the way. It will work out the same. And then plus 15, leave that last one alone. You're just rewriting the middle term. What's my next step here? Group them. Group the first two, group the last two. Do I need to do anything else with this grouping?
Yep. Negative, we got to change the sign.
I grouped behind a negative, that needs to change. If that had been a plus, it wouldn't have changed. What's in common on this first group?
3K.
Just a k, right? I'm left with 3k minus 5. What about the second group? That's where I have my 3, right? 3k minus 5. These groups should be the same, right? That's one of my groups here. My second group is here. And again, order doesn't matter. You could list it k minus 3, 3k minus 5. That does not matter. It's one of them's plus and one of them's minus. So your special case looks like this, plus and minus. It doesn't matter which one's plus or minus, but they're going to be identical.
What if the 9 was?
This is the second special case. And for this quiz, I'm actually going to tell you their special cases, right? So it's actually going to say you have special cases. So you should be looking for them. For this one, I'm going to take the square root. Happens to be 16 and 9 again. That was nice of them. All right. So we know those are perfect squares. What we're checking is if we were to take those perfect square roots and double those products, would we get the middle? And we would here. 2 times 4 times 3 is 24ab. So I know I have a perfect trinomial here. For this one, this is going to make up my two terms. I'm going to have a 4a and a 3b. This is going to tell me what's going to go in between them. Whatever that second term is, that's what you're going to use there. And then you just square it. And that is your answer. And if I were to FOIL it, if I wanted to check it, remember to check these. It's going to be 4a minus 3b times 4a minus 3b. So to check these, you are FOILing. So if you check it by FOILing, you need to make sure you write it out twice and simplify. And you'll see that that makes up that middle term when you FOIL it. That's exactly what I started with. This is the right answer.